On the morning of September 25th, 2025, a team of investigators arrives in a remote municipality in the southern Philippines. They are led by the new Public Works Secretary, Vince Dizon, and a man who has become a national symbol of anti-corruption, Baguio Mayor Benjamin Magalong. A retired police general, Magalong's presence is a deliberate signal. He is the man they send when the rot is so deep it needs a surgeon. They are not here by accident. They are hunting for a very specific and very expensive ghost. According to this document, right here on this spot stands a 96.5 million flood control project. A wall to protect a nearby school from a river. The contractor, St. Timothy Construction Corp., a name on a piece of paper. But St. Timothy is not just a random company. It is one of at least 9 interconnected firms controlled by a single family. A family that has perfected the art of turning paper fictions into personal fortunes. The official record, the one filed in the National Treasury, says this project was bid out in 2021, awarded in January 2022, and 100% complete by October 2022. The contractor, St. Timothy, was paid in full. This is the bureaucratic magic of the scam. The Treasury has a receipt, the public has the debt, but the project has never existed. But there is no project, there is no wall, and there is nothing.
Noong 2022, may nakita ba kayong nasimento dito? Doon sa kabila, may nakita ba kayong nasimento noong 2022 hanggang 2023? Wala. Kailan nagawa ito?
The locals confirmed the investigators' worst fears. No work was ever done here. Not in 2022, not in 2023, not in 2024. The equipment arrived just as the scandal began to break in Manila. It wasn't sent to do a job. It was sent to build an alibi, a last-ditch attempt to make the fiction real. The local engineer, Rodrigo Larete, can only mumble.
Bakit ka nagbayad ng hindi complete?
This is not just a failed project. This is a fabrication, a fiction created on paper to steal nearly 100 million pesos. Magalong gives the site its new official designation.
Pero wala, ghost project talaga. At ito, papakasuhan na namin yung DE na yan. At kung magsabi siya kung sino pa ang mga involved dito.
This is the other side of the crime. This is where the stolen 96.5 million pesos and the billions more just like it truly landed. In the Philippines, an archipelago defined by water, the flood is a fact of life. But in provinces like Bulacan, one of the country's most flood-prone regions, it has become something else. They call it a water world. This is Barbara Lacap. She has lived in her home in Barangay Iba Oeste for more than 50 years. She and her daughter, Christy, say the water used to come, but it would always leave. Now it stays. This is a direct consequence of the crime. The stolen money was meant to build the fences, the dikes, the drainage that would let the water recede. The theft in Davao created the permanence in Bulacan. This is the life on the lower floors, a perpetual state of inundation. Families are forced to abandon the lower floors of their houses, moving their kitchens, their beds, their entire lives upstairs. Children are carried to school through stagnant, murky water. The constant exposure breeds disease. Health workers report spikes in leptopsoriasis and athlete's foot, but also dengue diarrhea and a constant low-level state of sickness. This is the grim, waterlogged existence for millions, an existence they were promised would be fixed, an existence, in fact, they had already paid for. And this is life for the people paid to stop the floods. Meet Pacifico and Cesara Discaya. In a few short years, this couple would build an empire. The press would soon call them the king and queen of flood control. Their origin story, which Pasig Mayor Vico Soto would later flag as likely a paid-for PR piece, was compelling. He, Pacifico, a man who once considered entering the priesthood for financial reasons, she, Sarah, a former dental clinic receptionist. The reality was less rags to riches and more contracts to riches. From zero revenue in 2015, their network of at least 9 construction firms, including St. Timothy from our crime scene, Alpha and Omega, and St. Gerard, was awarded 421 flood control projects, valued at an astonishing 31 billion pesos. To put that into perspective, that's more than the annual net revenues of some of the country's oldest and largest corporations, like Ayala Land. How did they corner the market? It wasn't just connections, it was a cartel of one. In Senate testimony, Cesara Discaya would later admit her 9 firms sometimes bid against each other for the same government project.
Si Alpha and Omega and St. Gerard, hindi po sila nagsasali sa isang bidding. Pero
Okay
yung
nga.
ibang licenses, magkakasama sila minsan.
And then, so minsan naglalaban-laban yun, Sham.
Yes po.
Oh, so that is not a legitimate bidding. Dahil yung Sham na yon na naglalaban-laban sa isang award sa isang kontrata, iisa lang ang may-ari. So kahit sino doon, kahit sinong manalo doon sa bidding na yon, ikaw ang panalo. Dahil sa'yo lahat yun eh. Correct? Tama?
Hindi po, kasi iba yung may-ari ng mga companies.
Oh, sus. Kasi sabi
I'm
mo
just
lang
concerned with Alpha and
Miss
Omega.
Discaya.
Opo.
It was a phantom competition. No matter which company won the bidding, the Discayas won.
Luxury.
Opo.
Kailan ka natuwa roon sa payong ng Rolls Royce?
Last year lang po.
Last year mo lang na-purchase.
Yes po.
Yung payong. Dahil sa payong, bumili mo ha?
In an interview that would later go viral and become a symbol of the entire scandal, Cesara Discaya boasted about one of her most expensive purchases. When later questioned in the Senate about her family's staggering sudden wealth, her defense was simple.
Pwede naman siguro kami po kumita.
This is the story of a scandal, but it is not just another case of graft. The money stolen by the Discayas and their partners wasn't just for roads or bridges. It was specifically allocated and tagged for climate adaptation. This money was the nation's entire defense fund against the climate crisis, and the timing of the discovery could not have been more damning. On September 24th, 2025, the same week the scandal broke, the annual World Risk Report again named the Philippines as the single most disaster-prone country on Earth. The threat is not abstract, it is existential. This is the anatomy of a climate crime. The story of how a nation's primary defense against a worsening climate crisis was deliberately sabotaged for personal gain. The story of how for a cartel of elites, the climate crisis was not a threat, it was a business opportunity. The floods, the typhoons, the rising seas, they were a renewable source for infinite state-sponsored greed. So how does a scam of this scale begin? It doesn't start in a field. It starts here, in Congress, and at its center is this man, Representative Elizalde Zaldi Co. From 2022 to 2025, he was one of the most powerful men in the country. As chairman of the Appropriations Committee, he held the nation's purse strings. He decided who got what and where. This is what whistleblowers would later call the original sin, the practice of legislative insertions. This is the modern pork barrel, a system declared unconstitutional in 2013, but resurrected in the shadows. Here's how it works. Normally, an agency like the DPWH plans projects based on engineering studies and a regional needs assessment. But here, during closed-door budget meetings, a powerful lawmaker inserts funding for a specific, often vaguely defined project, like a flood wall, into the budget. This project has bypassed all normal planning. Other lawmakers, like Representative Toby Tianko, would provide the street-level jargon. The practice is called parking, or sagasa, to railroad. An insertion is railroaded into a district's budget, often without the local representative even knowing. Senator Erwin Tolfo would state the obvious. In short, it's pork barrel. And who builds these inserted projects? This is where the conflict of interest becomes glaring. Zaldi Co.'s family has deep roots in both business and politics. While co-chaired the committee, companies linked directly to his family were awarded a staggering 15.7 billion pesos in government contracts. SunWest Incorporated, founded by Zaldi and his brother, received 10 billion pesos, the biggest allocation of any single firm. High-Tone Construction, also formed by his brother, racked up 4.6 billion pesos. And his sister's firm, FS Co-Builders, received 1.2 billion pesos. Under Co's chairmanship, SunWest's flood control contracts alone ballooned by 272%. Co has denied all allegations, claiming he divested from his family's companies in 2019, but investigative journalists found this to be another paper fiction. Corporate records show his wife, Mylene Co, remains an incorporator of the SunWest Care Foundation as of April 2024, a foundation that, according to its own website, is supported and funded by SunWest Group Holding Company, Inc. The family's hands never left the purse.
Philippine President Marcos Jr. lashes out at two government contractors for the shoddy quality of their flood control projects in Bulacan.
With the project funded, the contractor has two ways to steal the money. The ghost project is one. The second, and more common, is the substandard project. Physically built, but functionally useless. This is the second, more insidious method of theft. And in August 2025, President Marcos himself became the nation's star witness.
St. Timothy ang kontratista dito. Kaya titingnan natin, kailangan pasagutin natin kung bakit ganitong ginawa nila. Meron kami mga diver na sinisid dun sa ilalim at nakita talaga very manipis lahat ng simento, hindi pantay-pantay, basta hindi magandang trabaho.
At that time, President Marcos himself discovered this during a personal inspection. His impromptu quality test became the defining image of the scandal. A multi-billion peso defense that crumbles in your hand. This single moment opened the floodgates, and in the Senate, whistleblowers would soon explain exactly how and why that wall was designed to fail. It wasn't an accident. It was a line item in the budget of theft. The shortchanged cement was the physical proof of the kickbacks that had already been paid.
Unang-una yung semento, ganyan lang kakapal. Eh dapat 18 centimeters, 18 cm, mga 8 inches, parang kalsada. Hawakan ninyo, sa kamay, kayang durugin. Malabnaw yung semento na ginamit. Nagtipid sa semento.
Based on the sumbong ng Pangulo website.
And now, we know why the projects are substandard. Fearing for their lives and seeking government protection, these three men, former DPWH engineers from the Bulacan district, decide to talk. Their names: Henry Alcantara, the district engineer, Bryce Erickson Hernandez, his assistant, and JP Mendoza, the construction section chief. They are the complicit bureaucrats from the Iron Triangle, now turned state witnesses.
Hindi po namimit ko ano po yung eksaktong nasa plano, Your Honor.
Hernandez testifies under oath that it was standard practice to use cheaper, longer drying cement and low quality steel. Why? To cover the kickbacks. He would later allege that most infrastructure projects built in Bulacan since 2019 were substandard or overpriced.
I have one last question for Bryce. So, tama po, lahat po ng project talaga ninyo kailangan i-substandard at iba i-goes para maibigay po yung commitment, yung 25% to 30%.
Opo, lahat po ng project sa amin may proponent po, may obligasyon pong SOP.
His sworn affidavit provided the price list. For flood control projects, the legislators' cut was 30%. For other projects, 25%. This wasn't a bribe. It was a fixed, non-negotiable cost of doing business. The contractors themselves, the Discayas, would later testify that at least 17 members of the House of Representatives demanded a similar 25% cut. Most cinematic, most damning testimony is about how that money was delivered. Senator Erwin Tulfo asks Hernandez just how much he delivered to Zaldico's associates.
Maraming maleta po ng pera yon, Your Honor. Tingin ko po, billion po yon.
Billion?
But Hernandez and Mendoza didn't just see the money. They delivered it. This is the system, made physical. Based on the sworn testimony of Bryce Hernandez and JP Mendoza, this is how the kickbacks were paid. A convoy of 6 to 7 vans would drive through Manila at night. They pull into the basement of an upscale hotel in Taguig City, the Shangri-La.
Ang laman po ng isang maleta nasa 50 million po.
Whistleblower JP Mendoza testified they went straight to the elevator going up to the penthouse, Zaldico's penthouse. They are met by a man. Hernandez and Mendoza swear they didn't deliver the cash to Co directly. They gave it to his aides, men they knew only as Paul and Mark. Hernandez testified he did see Co in the hotel, meeting with his boss, Alcantara, but Paul was the one who handled the bags. JP Mendoza testified that when the Shangri-La delivery stopped, they continued to Co's private home on Ladybug Street, Valle Verde 6. 20 suitcases, 6 vans, 1 billion pesos in cash. It is a scene from a movie, but it is sworn testimony. Senator Erwin Tulfo states, after all the cuts were made, only 30 to 40% of a project's budget remained for the actual construction. The rest, it was in the suitcases. The result, the crumbling wall, the water world. This is the iron triangle of Philippine corruption, a closed symbiotic loop. Firstly, political patrons like Zaldico and, as whistleblowers would allege, House Speaker Martin Romualdez, who insert the projects. Second, complicit bureaucrats like Alcantara and Hernandez, who falsify documents and approve payments for ghost projects. Thirdly, crony contractors like the Discayas and the Cove families own firms who build the substandard projects and pay the billion-peso kickbacks. The profits are then recycled into campaign contributions to re-elect the politicians, starting the entire corrupt cycle all over again. The testimony was explosive. The numbers, 1 billion pesos, 30%, 31 billion pesos, were abstract. But what truly ignited the public's fury was something far more visceral. A digital protest movement that had begun in Nepal found its new, furious epicenter in the Philippines. Filipinos online began a form of digital vigilantism. They meticulously documented the lavish lifestyles of children of the implicated contractors and politicians. It was dubbed the Nepo Baby Backlash. On the right, the flooded communities, Barbara Lacop. On the left, a barrage of day-in-the-life vlogs from the children implicated in the scandal. Rapper Glock 9's protest anthem, Upuan, which means chair, became the soundtrack to their Robs to Riches lifestyle. The first targets were the children of the king and queen of flood control. In a Senate hearing, Cesara Discaya admitted her family owned a fleet of luxury vehicles, which her children used all the time. But it was this split screen that drove the point home.
Ilan yung luxury cars mo?
Nasa 28 po.
Women's rights group, Salin Lahi, did the math. They calculated that 38 of the Discaya family's luxury cars were worth 465 million pesos. That money, they noted, could have built 715 classrooms for the very children now wading through the floods. The public's caption was brutal. Your car is worth more than their home. But the backlash would soon center on one person who would become the global face of the scandal, Claudine Ko. Claudine is the niece of Zaldi Ko, the appropriations chairman, and she is the daughter of Christopher Ko, his brother. Together, their family firms, Sunwest and Hightone Construction, were awarded 15.70 billion pesos in government contracts. As the scandal unfolded, digital sleuths unearthed her vlogs. The clips were staggering. There was Claudine documenting her apartment hunting in Paris. There she was attending the Fendi fashion show, wearing a jacket worth over 170,000 pesos. There she was again, vlogging her purchase of a new Mercedes G-Wagon, a car worth up to 22 million pesos. Backlash, Claudine Ko and her sisters deleted their social media accounts. Powerful contrast galvanized public anger in a way that spreadsheets of stolen billions never could. This wasn't just outrage, it was a digital lifestyle check fueled by deep class resentment and generational anger. The Nepo babies hadn't just been flaunting wealth, they had been documenting the proceeds of a climate crime. They were, in effect, posting the receipts. The digital anger spilled onto the streets. It was called the Trillion Peso March, named that for 1.09 trillion pesos in climate funds lost to corruption. Tens of thousands, students, labor unions, celebrities like Vice Ganda, and church groups led by Cardinal Pablo David filled the streets of Manila and other cities. They marched on the 53rd anniversary of the Declaration of Martial Law, a deliberate, powerful statement linking the plunder of the Marcos dictatorship to the plunder of the present under the dictator's son. Their demands were clear, not just arrests, but the full recovery of stolen wealth and the lifting of bank secrecy laws. The protests were so massive, the president could not ignore them. In a press conference, President Marcos Jr., the man whose family was overthrown on this same highway, strategically positioned himself on the side of the people, attempting to co-opt their anger. The president was angry, but he was also trapped. The scandal, which he himself had first revealed in his State of the Nation address, was now implicating the very heart of his government, including his own cousin.
So I don't blame them. I don't blame them. Not one bit. If I wasn't president, I might be out in the streets with them. So, of course, they are enraged. Of course, they are angry. I'm angry.
A combination of public fury and damning whistleblower testimony created a political earthquake. The scandal became so toxic it toppled the leadership of both houses of Congress. House Speaker Martin Romualdez, the man accused of masterminding the scheme and running a four-man small committee to insert billions in backroom deals, was forced to resign. Deputy Speaker Ronaldo Puno testified this small committee was, in reality, just two men, Zaldi Co and Senate President Chiz Escudero. Senate President Chiz Escudero, also implicated by whistleblowers, likewise stepped down. He was unceremoniously ousted by his peers after whistleblower testimony directly implicated him in receiving a 20% cut from an 800 million peso insertion, a 160 million peso kickback delivered to his aide. Zaldi Co, the architect of the insertions, resigned. He then fled the country, claiming he needed medical treatment in the United States. But by November, the Department of Justice reported he was in Spain. They issued an Interpol Blue Notice to track his movements, discussed extradition, and openly labeled the architect of the original sin a fugitive from justice. The government scrambled to respond. President Marcos, who had first decried the corruption in his State of the Nation address, ordered the creation of an independent commission, the ICI, to investigate. The legal gears began to grind. The Anti-Money Larceny Council froze over 700 bank accounts. The National Bureau of Investigation recommended plunder charges against Co, Estrada, and Villanueva. It looked like accountability, but the path to accountability was immediately compromised. The contractors, the Discayas, after briefly cooperating, suddenly withdrew their offer, backing out of the ICI probe. Almost immediately, the ICI itself came under fire. The ICI was criticized as a toothless body and constitutionally suspect. It was created by an executive order from the president to investigate a scandal in the DPWH, an agency also under the president.
Yung ICI ngayon is not really independent. It's under the control of Malacanang. They're using DOJ lawyers. They are using NBI people. So it's under the direct control of the executive department.
The executive was investigating the executive. To many, it was seen as a PR move and not a real threat, a way to manage the public's fury without fundamentally changing the system that produced Zaldi Co, the Discayas, or the Iron Triangle. This feeds a deep public cynicism, a fear of the plea bargain, where the powerful are allowed to return a fraction of their loot in exchange for freedom, a system of accountability with an escape hatch. And this is the final bitter paradox. The scandal was born from a system of political dynasties, like the Co family, who used their political power to enrich their businesses. As one protest group said, the rot literally runs in the blood of dynastic and corrupt families. 67% of Congress members belong to political dynasties. For over 35 years, the Constitution has mandated an anti-dynasty law. But the very people tasked with writing that law are the dynasts themselves. That loophole, as may be defined by law, is the entire game. For 3 decades, that law has never been written. They are being asked to legislate against their own power, their own families, their own businesses. They are being asked to dismantle the Iron Triangle from the inside, and so they do nothing. The money is gone. The politicians have resigned. The contractors are in their mansions, and in Bulacan, the water is still rising. The scandal exposed a system of rot so deep it has fused with the foundations of the state. It revealed a country where the gravest existential threat, the climate crisis, was transformed into the most lucrative business opportunity. The fight for accountability is not just about jail time. It is a fight for a livable future. A search for solid ground in a nation drowning in deceit.